to Creative Conversations. I'm Roger Humphrey. In this episode, I'm pleased to welcome author and activist Jane Jelenek. For over 35 years, she has battled both corporation and government to get a chemical dump site cleaned up to help save the town of St. Louis, Michigan. Her first book, Tombstone Town, came out 10 years ago. The follow-up book, Toxic Town Cleanup, was just published a few months ago. Please join us as she explains her difficulties as the president of a citizens task force to force the leaders to do the right thing. Before we begin, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. It's free and easy and really helps the channel a lot. Thanks. And so we are welcoming author Jane Jelenek to my little home studio here. And we're going to talk to Jane about her new book. Hi, Jane. Thank you for stopping by.
I'm happy to be here, Roger.
A little truth in advertising. Jane and I are old pals. We go back a long way. But you've written a second book, and that's really kind of where I kind of want to get into that in a little bit. And I'm sure you want to get into it quickly. But let's, if we can, please. You have a writing background, right?
Yeah, I do. That was what I was good at in school. From grade school all the way through. Wasn't good with numbers. Avoided much science as I could. Had to take Mr. Budge's class, but didn't have to take chemistry. And that's been interesting in my life because working with this cleanup group, I have learned a lot of chemistry. and the book, I do explain, or at least give the long name of the initials for the various chemicals. But yeah, isn't that interesting that I was led that way to actually learn? Mr. Stuckey got a big kick out of that when I told him about that.
I bet he did.
Yeah.
That's funny. So let's talk about the situation. The history of that. We had a chemical factory, actually not too far from where we're sitting right now, and then they had an accident over there. Can you pick it up from there? Just kind of give us a...
Right, and the accident is what we all remember most distinctly, is the mixing up of PBB with a animal mineral substance that was supposed to be an animal feed, but instead the PBB got into the animal feed. And then the feed was fed to all kinds of animals, farm animals, not only cows, but chickens and sheep and pigs and everybody. And then it got into the human food chain. So
Sure.
Then we all of us in Michigan that were alive back then and that ate food from the grocery store or farms,
farm to
wherever
table,
we
right.
got it. We have much higher levels of PBB in our systems than the rest of the nation. So it's something that happened. So part of what I have done in the last probably dozen years now is working with researchers at Emory University to, they do the actual research, but we are involved in community meetings to spread the word about the health outcomes of having PBB in your system. And it isn't only for those of us who actually ate the food, but our children and our grandchildren. Very sadly, it moves down through the generations.
Now, this is also part of the task force that you're on. That's part of the mission of the task force.
Yes, I'm in. Was a founding member of the Pine River Superfund Citizen Task Force.
Boy, there's a lot of syllables.
It's a lot, and I'll explain why. But yes, I've been part of that since our beginning in late 1997, and we actually incorporated in 1998 as a nonprofit group. So, but yes, we were at that time. We didn't know anything about citizen advisory groups. That's sort of what we are. And the other part, the long one, is our name. But EPA had started these citizen advisory groups, that's what they called them, of just ordinary people that wanted input into a big cleanup like this. So we organized ourselves that way, And we were told by the EPA community person we should call ourselves the Velsicol Superfund Cleanup Group or something like that. But Velsicol was in the name. And we said, we don't want to name ourselves after the polluter, you know. So we said, what do we want to name ourselves after? The Pine River, because that was a highly polluted by the chemical company. Pine River Superfund, and it's a Superfund site that it has been since 1982. And Pine River Superfund Citizen, that's us, folks. Task Force, because we thought we might be involved for 5 years and then we'd be done.
Surprise.
Yeah, here we are 26 years later.
Wow.
And we're still going at it. Yep.
So, well, for reference, for people who don't know anything about this area, we're sitting in the town of St. Louis, which is smack dab in the middle of Michigan's Lower Peninsula. We call ourselves the middle of the mitten, little 5,000 plus population, largely rural and largely agricultural. Yep. And the Pine River is the river that flows through this area. And rivers, 100 years ago, rivers were treated poorly nationally and probably internationally. I mean, you can go to India.
Right. Yeah.
They give you stories about their rivers too. And so rivers are, so what we have here is the Velsicol chemical company that was located here, PBB incident, the accompanying lawsuits, right, that ultimately put the company into bankruptcy or out of business at least. I don't know. Did they go bankrupt?
No, the state of Michigan and the federal government let them off. They signed an agreement with them to let them leave town. They had to put some money towards the Gratiot County landfill cleanup and some money towards the chemical plant cleanup, the first cleanup. That was back in the 80s. We're on our second cleanup now. Okay. But that was all. They were allowed to leave. So they continued on. They had factories in Tennessee, Illinois, New Jersey, and other places as well.
With the same amount of destruction as they left here?
I'm afraid so. Yeah. And over the years, we've contacted people in those communities and offered our help to get them set up as a citizens group. Hasn't happened. Different ones are interested at different times, but it hasn't happened. And there's virtually no cleanup in those states of the Velsicol sites. Velsicol just recently, in the last 10 years, has been bought out by I believe it's a Swedish pharmaceutical and makeup personal products company. But they've kept their name. They're still Velsicol, and they still deal in chemicals. And they did sell their patent for PBB, the Firemaster PBB that they made, to another chemical company. And even though the name has changed, it's still being manufactured at that company. So, but I have to say, PBB is the thing we talk about probably with the most understanding, because we all of our age, we lived through it, you know.
Right.
But they made 250 different chemical compounds, and some of them much more lethal, really dangerous than PBB. And DDT, the pesticide, was one. They were a huge manufacturer of DDT from the 30s through World War II and all the way into the early 60s when they finally shut that down. So one of our cleanup things has been dead birds in the neighborhood. People over the years would come to us and say, found dead birds in our yard. We tried to get EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, the federal agency, to address that, to test the birds and see why they died, and the state of Michigan. And they both said, oh, it's probably just West Nile virus, and they never tested them. So one of your neighbors in this neighborhood, finally she took a couple of her dead birds that she just found, down to a lab in Lansing at the DNR, I believe. And when they sampled them and tested them, they found that they had the highest DDT levels ever found in wild birds.
Wow.
And this is 40 years after manufacturing had quit over there of DDT. I think it was almost 40 years. Anyway, so that information that we brought the toxicology tests back to EPA, and they said, oh, well, maybe this will give us some ammunition so we can get money to help clean up the neighborhood, because we knew the neighborhood yards had been sampled by DEQ at the time, now called Eagle, and areas in the yards were found to be so high in DDT that you weren't even supposed to touch the soil. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it did. That information that our neighbor got did help EPA get money to do a cleanup in the neighborhood. I don't know, I think it was over 114 residences that had their yards cleaned up. It was 12 blocks of residences that had their yards. Were you one of them?
Yes, I was.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I was.
Did you ever have the orange snow fence in your yard marking the really bad spots?
No.
Okay. Some of them over west of you had to live with that for like 5 years.
Oh.
And you know, can you imagine trying to sell your house and somebody says, why do you have snow fence just in that area of your yard? And well, because it's so contaminated that we can't have our kids or our pets even get close to it. So,
It's deadly.
yeah.
Welcome home.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the kind of thing our group has been addressing
Well, your
over
first
the
book,
years.
your first book was the first 25 years of that aggravation, right? And now the new book,
Yep.
that's just out, like what in the last couple of months.
Yes.
The first book was out, what, 6-7 years ago?
In 2015 it was published.
Oh, okay,
Yep.
so 9 years ago,
Yep.
from
Yep.
almost 10.
Yes. So what I did is that book ended in 2013, and so this book starts in 2014 and carries through 2023.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was my goal, do another 10 years, and then we have a new chairperson now, and she's actually a history professor at CMU, Central Michigan University, and I actually I said to her, it's your responsibility to do the next 10 years. So, yeah.
Yeah, you did your turn.
I did. Yeah, 2 turns.
2 turns.
Yes.
And it's reading the book, and I have not finished it. I fully intend to, but in reading the book, the amount of duplicity
Yes.
that is there, I expect a little bit, because you're always you can't do something like that without stepping on somebody's toes or nudging your way into somebody's fiefdom.
Mm-hmm.
And but this seems to be a level above that people are just trying to, they want it to go away, and for them, they make it go away the way a child plays hide and seek. They close their eyes.
Yeah. You're exactly right. I'm glad you picked up on that. And actually the city of St. Louis in the early years was that way. And we had multiple conversations with council members and the mayor and the city manager, and they just couldn't see it our way. Our way was, we got to know what's there to get it cleaned up. Their way was, we don't want to know about it. It's going to hurt the reputation of St. Louis. I'm sorry, but the St. Louis reputation had been injured pretty darn badly.
Yeah, pretty severely at that point. Yeah.
Anyway, so but after, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 years, they came around our way of thinking. So we've worked together since then. Yeah.
So in your first book was titled Tombstone Town.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain that title for people who haven't read the book?
When the first Superfund cleanup was done at the chemical plant site, they had to leave a monument that said what was there and to keep out and all that. And they chose to buy a tombstone from our local monument company here in town. And and we always, over the years, and so then the tombstone says no trespassing, there's chemical contamination, there's radiation contamination, you're not supposed to be here. And of course the whole site was fenced. And so over the years we gave the authorities the benefit of the doubt and thought, well, maybe they were just trying to give Boucher's Monument Company the business, or maybe just they thought it would look nicer than just a big rock, Well, in 2013, when my other book, when Tombstone Town book ends, one of the state of Michigan people actually came to our big celebration when we were getting the tombstone moved off the plant site over to the Historical Society. And I told her what our thinking was, and she said, no, I was there. She said it was a state of Michigan employee thought that would just be so funny to have a tombstone there because the town was going to die anyway after the chemical plant shut down. So that was the reasoning behind us having a tombstone.
A little cynical.
Downright cynical. Oh my gosh.
And to know that they're going into the project with that notion.
Yeah, with that attitude.
Yeah. Coming in with that attitude. There's nothing we can do. They're going to die anyway.
Yeah.
So that's so Tombstone Town is book 1. Book 2 is entitled. Got mine right here. It's called Toxic Town Cleanup. And these books are available at Amazon, right?
Yes, they are.
And there will be a link in the description so people can go down, go to Amazon and get their own copy. And the other thing that I should mention here, and I say this, I think there's going to be the sense that because we're friends, I'm saying it that way, but it's not. You have a very compelling style of writing.
Oh, thank you.
That when you start to read it, it's a page turner.
Yeah.
And as we sit here and discuss it, it sounds like a yawner, and it ain't.
No. There's lots of people involved. Not only our group, but the agencies, because we've dealt with a lot of agencies, especially EPA and the DEQ/Eagle, but also the Department of Justice and Fish and Wildlife Service and a lot of different agencies. So a lot of people involved, and I don't use much conversation, but I do quote some of them because I'd written it down in my notes or in the minutes, and they said it better than I could have, so I quote them. But no, when I started Tombstone Town, I started out writing it a little more academically, and I didn't like it. I thought, all of this is really interesting to those of us who are embroiled in it, but I want something that's going to read a little more like fiction, where it is a page turner.
It reads a little bit like a whodunit.
Yeah. So that's what I did for both of them.
And as a reader, I appreciate that.
Good. Thank you.
I don't need that extra cup of coffee to get through it.
Yeah, right.
Some books are a little tough at times.
Yeah.
So. And one of the things that I like to celebrate on this show is the do-it-yourself attitude that so many artists in general take. So many artists who sell their paintings, and it's a small business for them. So many musicians who self-produce their albums and kind of book their own gigs and do that, and are still able to support themselves. And authors who are self-published.
Okay.
And that used to be kind of it used to have kind of a tinge to it, didn't it?
It did.
But not anymore. There's some wonderful, and I've had several self-published authors on the show, and their stuff is wonderful. Their stuff is absolutely wonderful, and available, like I said, through Amazon. But how is that process working for you? I mean, was that something? Did you think about trying to find a legitimate publisher when you first started?
Oh yeah. In fact, I was taken on, or at least encouraged by, what's MSU Books? I forget what their actual name is. But like I said, mine wasn't academic, and so they eventually decided not to, and I didn't know what to do. I really didn't go out to Simon and Schuster and all those real ones, but I started investigating about how to just publish it myself, because I figured the only people that are really going to be interested in it are those who have lived through it, you know. And plus the royalties are better if you self-publish. So anyway, I investigated it. Back then, when I did the first book, it was called Create Space, and it was very easy to work with. Now it's been taken over by Kindle, Amazon, and the choices have magnified, and I found it much more difficult to navigate because I'm not a techie person, and I would do something and then I would want to back up and I couldn't back up, you know. So it took me a while, and actually I had my my eldest granddaughter, she's in her 30s and a professional photographer. She designed the cover for me, and got all that fixed because I just couldn't do it on Amazon. And but yeah, I think that self-publishing should be easy. So maybe I'll write them a letter.
Well, you have distribution now that you didn't have before. Used to be you had to sell them out of the trunk of your car.
I know.
You know, so now you've
got... it's so good now because you just, whoever orders it, they create the book right then. I don't have to store a bunch in my garage.
Right.
I do carry some in the trunk of my car for when people say, "Can I get your book?" Yeah, so.
So, yeah, and it's nice. For musicians, of course, we've been downloading for years as well, you know, and yeah, it's nice. I mean, I just all of a sudden, but yeah, the royalties. I mean, I go through a distributor and they get a piece of it.
Oh yeah, of course, I'm sure they do.
I've talked to a couple of artists, I won't drop any names, but they would be names that you would know, famous people, that lost their recording contracts years ago. Just because they no longer were cranking out top 10 stuff, and things had changed. And one guy told me, he said, I only sell, you know, at events now.
Oh yeah.
You know, and this is before the internet. And he said, I only sell them at events. And he said, to be honest with you, he said, I don't sell nearly as many albums as I used to. And he says, and I make way more money. He said, I should have done this at the start of my career. And so people don't realize what kind of a chunk that the manufacturers and the distributors take out of it. So self-publishing, self-producing, I think these have become quite legitimate, you know. And now there is a danger because you some way, shape, or form, these companies used to be gatekeepers.
Yeah.
And so there was a certain threshold, presumably, that you had to meet to get published. Today, the good news is anybody can get published, but the bad news is anybody can get published.
Right. So, and I guess now AI is publishing a lot of books too. You know, AI.
Right. Yeah.
What's it stand for?
Artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is what I need because my natural intelligence is waning.
But you know, somehow, I mean,
good catch.
I think it's wonderful that people that maybe would have not been accepted by a reputable publisher can do this now. I mean, I have friends that have published books, and you know, they're nothing like mine. I mean, but they're cranking them out. They're cranking out a series of this and a series of that, simply to make money. But they're having fun. So
sure, why not?
Yeah, and people are buying them. So
yeah, I think artificial intelligence has its uses. But it certainly has had its abuses.
Yeah.
I'm reading articles about it all the time.
Yeah.
And I get stuff online all the time. You know, let AI write a book for you in 6 hours, and you'll make $30,000 a day, and you know all these.
Right. Those are like what we used to see in the back of comic books, right? Those kind of ads.
Really cheesy things, right? Yeah. So anyway.
So the new book actually I would say the first half of it is, again, we don't have enough money coming in to get things done, blah, blah, blah. That has been a theme for us for most of the 26 years. And also EPA, and I don't know, some psychologists can analyze all this, but EPA had real resistance to us as a group, and that comes out in the book. We finally figured some things out, and I won't give it away, but so that's hard. But then when the infrastructure, the bipartisan infrastructure bill started getting talked about, some people wanted Superfund sites included in that, and a whole bunch of people didn't want it included, but it went through with the Superfund sites in it. So money poured in to not only the actual chemical plant site, but across the river where chemical things were burned up, the burn pit site.
Oh, okay.
And we were interviewed by a lot of big newspapers, including the Washington Post and I think the New York Times at that time too. And that's one of the questions was, if you get this money, what will you do with it? Well, we could just tell them exactly, because we've had these plans for all these years, and it's actually getting done. And the one thing we didn't look ahead and see and forecast beforehand was that all of because they were doing 3 or 4 projects at once instead of just one, all these reports were coming into us. They have to write a work plan and they have to write a design report, and all these things were coming to us so fast that as volunteers, we were having a hard time keeping up, reading everything, commenting on everything before it was actually done. It was a good problem to have because the money was flowing, and a lot has been accomplished. And of course, the book then details all the accomplishments. Some of them are getting the underground in situ thermal treatment, which is essentially heating up the ground down deep, like 30 feet, and it volatilizes the bad stuff down there and liquefies some of the bad stuff. Both are brought up, the vapors are brought up and captured and dealt with, and then the liquids is brought up and dealt with, and then the clean water that's left over goes back into the river, and the clean vapors go up in the stack that's over there, that big stack you see. And so they can only heat about an acre or less at a time, because we don't have enough electricity generated in this area to do more than that.
Right.
They put these heating elements down in the ground, lots of them, and bring the temperature of the underground up to boiling.
Okay.
And then all this process happens and they capture, and that goes on for months. And then by contract, and we got this in the contract, they have to, when it slows down and they think they've got it all, they have to go another 90 days to make sure.
Oh,
so
that's kind of cool.
Yeah, so that's happened now on the plant site itself in 3 different hot spots, and now is going on across the river at the burn pit site. And they're collecting lots of bad stuff. Yeah.
So do we have hopes that this land is going to be remediated totally, or pretty close to that?
It will be remediated, never totally, and there's going to have to be a pump and treat system ad infinitum. It's going to have to go forever. How do we let the next generation know how important that is?
Yeah.
Hopefully my book will help, but
podcasts and hopefully people who are listening or watching the podcast in other areas will take the time to read the books, both of them, and when they come into these situations, in their own hometown, because a lot of towns have their own issues.
Sure.
And it may not be a chemical plant, but it might be a manufacturing plant that is using some pretty nasty stuff for manufacturing and things like that. I mean, something as innocuous as a shoe factory can use some pretty nasty chemicals, and they always just used to dump that stuff into the rivers.
Yeah.
So anyway, hopefully this will be a great help to a lot of people. I thank you for writing the books and taking the time. Sure. And I thank you also for coming on the show. Thanks, Jane. Good to see you, pal.
Welcome, Roger. Yeah.
And thank you for watching.
Yeah.
Wow, that was a lot to think about. I want to thank Jane for coming on the show, and also thank her for writing her books. I strongly urge you to read them. This is a situation that is happening in many places, and I hope her story will help and encourage others. Hey, did you know I also write a weekly blog to keep you updated on my guests? Just go to www.rogerhumphrey.com and hit the blog tab at the top of the page. If you subscribe to my website, you'll get notified of each one as they come up, and I promise you, no spam. Thanks for listening. I hope you'll listen to more episodes real soon of Creative Conversations with Roger Humphrey.